think one of the best things you can do as an artist is create music that's authentic and true to who you are. When you reach this point, the music creation process is way less stressful. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. You don't have to show up and try to be someone that you're not or try to create something just to impress others. I believe all you have to do is create music that feels right to you. But that's easier said than done. So if you're struggling with creating authentic music, I'm gonna share 3 tips that I believe will help you with that. Before we dive into tip number 1, I wanna let you know that I created a free guide called the Authentic Sound Blueprint. And it's basically a 10-minute practice routine that you can use to help you, kind of like unlock your authentic sound. So make sure to check that out. It's completely free. I'll provide a link in the description. I'm sure a lot of you don't know this, but I'm 6'5". I know that's kind of crazy. I'm 6'5" and I've never played any sports. I'm gonna let that soak in. I'm 6'5" and I've never played any sports. I've always gotten the questions of like, hey, did you play basketball? Did you play football? Like, did you do track? Like what did you do sports-wise? And the answer was always, I didn't do any of that. I was always naturally gravitated towards music and creating in that space. Like in middle school, high school, I was in the band. I know, ain't that crazy? Like 6'5", didn't play any sports, but I was in the band. But I really enjoyed it. I started playing the piano when I was 8 years old, and I quickly fell in love with just creating something that wasn't already there. Growing up, I was always the more mellow, chill, relaxed type of guy. And yeah, I was never super loud or super high energy. And yeah, I don't know, just naturally, I was the type of person that was just more on the chill, relax, not doing too much. And that was just kind of my natural comfort zone of the type of person that I was and still am today. And that leads me to my first tip, which is you have to know your story. If you don't really know who you are and you're not super in tune with who you are as a person, it's not gonna really resonate with yourself and resonate with your audience. When you're really in tune with who you are, the type of stuff that you like, your music is gonna be reflected by that. So that's tip number 1, know your story. For me, I'm more on the chill side. Whenever I'm having a conversation with someone, I'm kind of high energy, but for the most part, I'm kind of very casual, very chill and soft spoken, so to speak. And, that's kind of what I typically express through my music, because that's just who I am as a person. So, we're talking about how to create authentic music. The first thing is to really know your story, know who you are, know the things that you like, the things that you don't like, and try to find ways to integrate those things that you do love into your music and into your creative process. Here's the one thing I love to do whenever I'm creating music. First, I'm gonna show you, and then we're gonna talk about it. So let's say I have a couple chords. This A minor chord, this E minor chord, and this F sharp minor chord. All right, let's say I just have a couple chords that I'm just sitting around with. I really like these 3 chords. I like the sequence. And one thing I love to do, I'm gonna show you, just watch. Okay, so what I did was first I started off with just a couple of chords, right? I started off with a couple of chords, and what I did was I just kind of just fed off of those couple of chords. I kind of just tried to come up with something. Well, first off, I had a foundation, and I began to add on to those chords, right? So rather than just playing, I began to kind of add on to what I was doing, each kind of iteration, more or less, so to speak. I was kind of I started adding little stuff. And I think that's how you can kind of like go from something that's not like, you know, fleshed out to something that has more of a complete idea to it. And it's also authentic to who you are. And that's really just starting off simple and then building off of that, right? I started off with these 3 chords, and then I began to build on top of those chords. Initially, it was just playing those 3 chords straight. And then we began to build. And that's the whole idea. I just started off with a couple of chords, and I began to build on top of those chords with like little musical ideas that I thought might sound interesting. And I can't even recommend this tip enough. Really just start off with something simple. Start off with a couple of chords and then begin to kind of like build things around those chords that you find yourself really gravitating towards in your music. For me, it's kind of like these little embellishments or these little passing chords. Right, just adding in little inflections, embellishments in those chords, and eventually you'll land on something that feels authentic and it feels true to who you are as a person. So that's tip number 2. Start simple and then build, right? Don't try to from the get-go just play something super crazy or super fancy. Start off with something simple and then build on top of that. I think something a lot of artists struggle with is this whole sense of perfection, right? This whole sense of my music has to sound perfect. It has to sound, everything has to flow in a very perfect and ideal way. And I believe when you have this whole mindset of perfection and following everything by like the rule book, you kind of lose, in essence, a sense of who you are as a person. You kind of like lose that authenticity that should be coming from your music. And I don't know, like perfection is something that I personally have to make sure that I'm keeping in check and making sure that I'm not letting this whole sense and notion of perfection stop me from creating, you know, beautiful music and music that is a direct representation of who I am and the things that I want to express out into the world. And that leads me to tip number 3, and that's letting go of this sense of perfection. And I think another part is also just releasing control of coming into, you know, this space where you're creating music with preconceived notions of what your music should sound like, right? So just releasing that control of saying like, hey, I actually don't know what I'm gonna play and I'm okay with that. I'm just gonna kind of like go with the flow and just try to like figure it out as I go. I think it will allow you to create these super authentic and beautiful pieces. One thing I love to do is, you know, let's say I got a couple chords, this G minor chord, and then like this D minor 11 chord. One thing I like to do is I like to really push kind of like the limits of what I'm doing. Like it probably will sound weird. Like as I'm playing, like right now I'm just kind of like, I'm just playing around with these 2 chords. I'm not necessarily thinking about like a rhythm. I'm kind of just like letting go. I'm just like playing around with a couple of chords, and I'm just playing around with different things in between those chords to just kind of like see where that takes me. And oftentimes as I'm playing with a couple of chords, I find that those chords might lead me to like a different space. I think the 3 tips that I've shared with you: know your story, start simple and build, let go. All three of those can begin to help you unlock and achieve like that authentic sound that you're searching for in your music. I hope this video was helpful. I just kind of wanted to put something together of some tips that have helped me out in my musical journey. And yeah, I just wanted to share it with you. So keep creating, keep going. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.